Hi, I'm Mary Gallagher, and I'm one of the authors of Teach a Child to Read with Children's books. Oh, we are super excited to be featured in Kathy Duffy's 102 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum. You can read more about that on our website at teachachildtoread.net. We'd also like to invite you to join our Facebook group, which is Teach a Child to Read. There's 3 short questions, and then I'll go ahead and get you approved very quickly so you can get in the group and get some free resources and some support. If you are not familiar with our book, I just wanted to give you a quick overview. Our book is used to help homeschoolers or parents or grandparents or really any adult that wants to help their child begin to read. We combine story reading, phonics, and writing to promote reading success. We also include other activities in there as well, but that's a summary. This is a common sense, doable approach to teach your child to read. We do not expect you to go out and buy expensive reading curriculums or packaged phonics programs. In fact, we talk about that extensively in our book and why we do not recommend that you do that. Many of the testimonials on our website are people who have said, gee, if I would have read your book first, I would have saved a lot of money. We just ask you to go out and get a library card and then be willing to take some risks and have some courage and believe in yourself that you can create a reading program using children's books and authentic children's literature to promote a love of books and a love of reading for your child. So this video is going to help you understand and give you some practical tips on how you can build your child's fluency skills. These are practical and easy to implement ideas and activities. Before I go into that, I'd like to remind you of all the ways that you can connect with us. I mentioned our free Facebook group. We also have a Facebook page. And we're new to Instagram, but we're getting up. So if you're on the gram, get in touch with us at Teach a Child to Read with all those underscores. And there is a Pinterest board. We have a blog and a website where you can purchase the book. And you can also get the free download and a free chapter and a free newsletter when you sign up for a download of the free chapter 5. So what is fluency? I think we all have an idea of what fluency is, but it's probably so much more than what you realize. So here are a couple of quotes from some experts and one quote from a not so much expert, but someone we respect as well. From the experts, fluency is reading that expresses the reader's understanding of the author's message. Okay, so if we read fluently, we can understand what the author was trying to convey. Fluent readers recognize that punctuation, sentence structure, and word placement all convey meaning. So a fluent reader looks at everything. They're taking in so many things as their eyes span the paper. They're not just sounding words out, okay? And fluency, according to one Title I reading student that I used to work with, is flowing through the sentence. I really like that because I really encourage you to talk to your children about their reading. They are so much more insightful than we give them credit for. So we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, research and all the experts tell us this, and your experience will show you this as well. Fluency directly impacts comprehension. That's positive and negative. If your child is reading fluently, they are going to be able to have the mental space and energy to focus on comprehension or getting meaning from the text. If your child is struggling with fluency, they're not going to understand what they've been reading, and you probably won't understand what they've been reading as well. Fluency, as I said, involves more than just a reading rate. So a lot of times you're in schools and your child may have been in a school situation where they were doing a lot of timed reading. He may have come home and talked to you about the teacher had a stopwatch and timed us reading. He may have learned that that means the teacher wants him to read quickly or fast. So there's more to reading fluency than just the rate. Rate is important, and I'll get to that in a second, but let's look at some other things that students need in order to be really considered fluent readers. They need sight word mastery. I'll show you that in a few slides of why that is so important. So sight words, or what we call high frequency words, are those words that we expect children to just be able to look at and read automatically. We don't sound those out. The children also need decoding skills and other strategies. If you need help with other strategies, see our video on self-monitoring for young readers, where we go into great detail about those strategies. Students and children need an awareness of punctuation and its purpose. If they don't know when to pause, when to stop, when to speak with excitement, when to ask a question, all of that's going to impact the fluency and then, of course, the meaning of the story. They need wide vocabulary. They need to know a lot of words. How do they get to know a lot of words? By you talking to them all the time, by you reading to them all the time, by you taking them places and experiencing things, and then reading and talking about those experiences. So children who come to the reading table, so to speak, who are come with a lot of vocabulary are just going to learn to read so much faster and easier than children who do not have vocabulary levels like that. It's a proven fact. There's lots of studies on that as well. Children also need to have an awareness of how good reading sounds. They get that from all the books that you read to them. They understand that we read with expression, that sometimes the characters are sad, or sometimes we read quickly because there's a pace or a cadence to the poem or the song, and sometimes we read slowly to emphasize or to draw out or to express sadness or something as scary is happening in the text. Children need to be able to organize text into meaningful phrases. That means they cannot just sound out individual letters and sounds and words. They need to be able to start chunking words and then chunking sounds into words and then chunking words into phrases so that they can see those phrases and how they fit together with the punctuation in the text. Of course, they need to learn to use expression and intonation, like we were just talking about. When is a character talking? What is the expression they're using? That all goes into understanding and, of course, enjoying a good book. And then they need to read at an appropriate rate. That's not too fast or too slow. So we don't want children to be reading slow and laborious. That will definitely impact comprehension. But children who, as I mentioned before, think that fluency is just about reading quickly will also miss out on comprehension because they're just focusing on racing to the end of a sentence or racing to the end of a page. So appropriate pace is really important. And of course, there are some guidelines for that, which I'll show you in a second. If any of these skills are missing, fluency can and will be compromised, which in turn will impact their comprehension. So if your child is struggling to understand what they read, take a look at this list and see if any of these things sound familiar. There are a lot of strategies for improving fluency. I'm just going to highlight a few of them, but you can do some additional research and find resources on the internet. And of course, we talk about this in length in our book, but modeling is number one. I'm always going to direct you back to the read aloud, and that's daily. So if you have to skip everything else in your day when it comes to reading time or reading instruction, skip everything else, but make time, whether it's at lunchtime or at the end of the day or bedtime, to do the read aloud, because that's when children hear modeling. And reading is taught and it's also caught. So believe it or not, your children are learning a lot when they listen to you read to them, or when they listen to other people read, or when they listen to an audiobook. They are learning how good reading sounds, and that is invaluable. Assisted reading, or we might call this duet reading, where you read a little and they read a little, that really helps because it takes the pressure off of them to get all of the words correct and to sustain, because if they're just starting out, it can be exhausting. They're learning something new and they're using their brains a lot. So especially if your child is prone to a short attention span or gets tired or frustrated easily, please practice assisted or partner or duet reading. Partner reading is kind of the same thing where someone else reads a paragraph and then your child reads it back to you, that kind of a thing. Echo reading would also fall into that where you literally say read a sentence, he reads the exact same sentence, and so you really model every single sentence for them. Shared reading of sentences could be where you read most of the sentence but ask them to read words that you point to because they're just starting to learn some of those things. And then there's part reading of poems. There's books called You Read to Me and I'll Read to You where you could do some of the shared reading activity. All of these are fun and they're easy to do and easy for anyone to implement, but they really will help with fluency. Repeated reading simply means your child reads the same book over and over until he reads it really, really well. For some children, that might be 1 or 2 readings. For some, it may be 5 or 6. There's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure it's a book your child enjoys. Give them a variety of people to read to, grandpa, grandma, the dog, the babysitter. We used, when I was teaching, kids would go and read to the horses on the farm, or if they took a trip to the zoo, they'd send me pictures of reading to the snakes at the zoo. And so anything to get your child to reread because that builds their confidence. You can also record your child reading if you just use your phone and then they can listen to themselves because again, they are very intuitive and very reflective and it will help them to see how they're reading compared to how they hear you reading. You can practice phrasing. That's where you just take chunks of words and phrases and just practice with where you might say, Mary went to the doctor. 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 And then talk about how that changes the meaning so that they understand expression is really important. We talked about expression and intonation. So they need to understand that we don't read monotone because we don't talk that way. And to really bring a story alive, they have to use that expression. So you need to model that as well for them. Help them to pay attention to punctuation, to learn that a period means stop, that a comma means pause, exclamation is showing excitement, etc. Teach them to use context clues of the words around them if they're stuck on a word so that they don't get stuck for too long. And then use different genres. Read a variety of books. Sometimes we get really stuck on the books that we like, but it may not be what excites our child. And also, they need to be exposed to different types of reading so that they could develop their fluency skills. Those high frequency or sight words are going to be really, really important. So if you have not been practicing those and your child's stumbling over words like the and would and love and some, then you need to get the flashcards out and you need to practice those. And 10 minutes a day practicing, build a pile of what he does know, practice the rest, and keep going, play games with them, that kind of a thing. Poetry is great for building fluency. We read poetry different than we read prose. Children need to know that. And of course, they usually love poetry. Reader's theater is kind of like practicing little scripts. You can go online and Google some reader's theater scripts. And especially if you have several students you're working with, this would be really fun because they get to practice their lines and then they get to kind of act them out. And so they have to be able to memorize or read, not necessarily memorize, but they have to be able to read fluently in order to participate. I mentioned poetry, but it's worth calling out just a little bit because it involves rhyming, the choral reading. So if you do have other siblings in the home, they can all get involved in that. And poetry, there's no age limits. Generally, even the older children will love younger nursery rhymes or silly books like Shel Silverstein and things like that. Also, again, great for that shared reading where you read back and forth and for the repeat readings. Repeated readings, I have a little thing called the Lucky Listeners chart. So if you join our Facebook group, please be sure to ask me or look in the files for the Lucky Listeners chart. It's there free for you to use and a little explanation of how to use it. Make sure that what you're reading is high interest. So poetry is usually high interest for young students, especially the fun and silly poetry, and they love rhymes. It's short and quick, so they're not intimidated by it. And again, it's fun for everybody, so everybody could get involved in that. So just a special shout out to poetry. It's a really critical piece for helping to develop fluency in readers. I talked about the sight words or high frequency words like some and the and where and when, but what you need to know is why these are so important. So if you look at this information, the first 100 words from the instant word list from Fry's word list represents 50% of all the words children encounter in elementary school reading. So if they don't know those first 100 words automatically, that's 50% of their reading that's going to be compromised. So you can see just studying those high frequency sight words is really critical. The complete list of all 300 words contains almost 2/3 of all the words the students encounter in their reading. So think about that. If a student is weak in their sight words, they're definitely going to be weak in their fluency. And then, of course, they really are going to struggle with comprehension, which is the whole purpose for reading. So you can, we're going to talk a little bit about fluency passages. If you're interested in checking out some fluency passages, I have some caveats on this, but I do want to include it here. You can go to easycvm.com and you can get grade level passages. I believe that those should be free for you. What this looks like is that you introduce the story and you talk a little bit to activate the background knowledge, just like you would with a book. You begin the stopwatch as students begin reading out loud. Now you want to do this kind of nonchalantly so they don't really know that you're timing them. So, having your phone or having it in your lap or something like that is great. If your student gets stuck on a word, just give them the word to keep the fluency going. This is not the time to use a lot of the self-monitoring strategies because you want to just get a quick read on the student. And then just tell them to stop after reading 1 minute, even if they don't finish the passage. Now, this might feel awkward for the child, so just say, hey, this was just a practice, and then once they stop, they can go ahead and you can talk about it, and then they can read it again later. Just make a note where he ended or any errors or missed words. That helps you determine what kind of issues might be going on. And then you're just going to count the words, subtract any missed words, and record at the bottom of the page. So if the child read 60 words but had 3 errors, it's really just 57 words in that minute of timed reading. Okay, and then if you were keeping a graph on this, you would just record in the first box, and then the next time you did it, you would record the next number. If the child self-corrects, it's not an error. So if they say fog instead of frog, but then they go back and fix it, just keep on going. You don't count that as an error. And then anytime you do any type of reading, even with this, ask them to tell you about the story so you can check for comprehension. That helps you to see if there's anything going on there. And then review any missed words so that next time he reads it, the fluency will have improved. So why do we want to do fluency timed passages? The only reason you really want to do this is to get an idea of where your child's reading level is, because oftentimes when we're working with our children at home, we may not have the ability to compare with other children like a teacher would in a classroom of 23 other students. And you may be concerned or worried that your child is far behind, or you may not realize if they are far behind. So whenever I worked with parents who are working with their children at home, I did like to introduce them to the timed fluency so they could see that where their child was, because a lot of times they were overly concerned that their child was struggling, or maybe under concerned, and I was more concerned than they were. So it's just a good kind of baseline. It's not something you're going to do every day. You're going to do this like maybe every 6 weeks just to see if they're making progress, just to give you kind of that comfort and that baseline to know what's going on. Caution, if you do this daily, you will kill the love of reading in your children. And again, you will just teach them that fluent reading is about speed, and that's not what we're looking for. So if you're curious, these are the approximates. These may change depending on the reading programs that you look at, but these are typically by the end of the grade level. And so typically by grade 5 or 6, children are reading at an adult reading rate. Now, some will never reach 170. Some will read 145, 150, but if they're reading accurately and they comprehend, no worries. If a child finishes first grade at 45 words per minute, but they're very accurate, they're not missing a lot, and they understand what they're reading, again, no need to panic. These are approximates. I just wanted to give you an idea so you would have a realistic understanding. One tool that I think is particularly wonderful to help with fluency, in addition to all the things that you're going to do, but I understand that sometimes you're very busy and you have other children in the home, and so you need some help. RazKids.com is a program that you can purchase, and it's designed to promote fluency. What I particularly like about it, I used this many years ago with my students who were struggling readers and beginning readers, was that the student always has the option to listen to the story first, and then he gets to read the story with assistance. If he's stuck on a word, he clicks on it and the program reads the word just like you would if you were sitting next to him. The student can read the story as many times as he wants until he's fluent, and then the student can even record himself reading the story to listen back or for you to listen to if you were busy doing something else and he wanted to tell you, hey, I really read this fluently. I really feel good about this story. And then there is a short quiz to check for comprehension. So this is again something that's completely optional for you, but something I don't recommend a lot of paid programs, as I said, but this is one tool that I think is particularly useful if you did have that in your budget to access. So in summary, it's really important you're going to read aloud daily because that's modeling what fluent reading sounds like. You're going to use some fluency passages to monitor improvement. That's only about every 6 weeks. And you're going to do lots of rhyming poetry, lots of repeated readings of whatever material you're working with. And you're going to work on those sight words if your child does not have those mastered. You also want to increase your child's self-monitoring skills. That's going to develop fluency. See our video on self-monitoring for young readers for specific strategies on that. Okay, if you need any help, I'd love for you to reach out and contact me at info@teachachildtoread.net and just let me know what you need. I've got resources and can answer your questions very quickly. I've been doing this for almost 30 years, so trust me when I say there is no question that is wrong or dumb, and I don't expect parents who are just starting out to know the things that I've learned over the course of 30 years working with lots of different readers and a master's degree and lots of experience in this area. So please reach out if you need help. I'm happy to assist. Again, many ways to connect with us, so please let us know. If you watched a video and then found us this way, we would love to connect with you.